Picture this. A successful surgeon with six-pack abs, a six-figure income and a luxury car sits alone at a bar, unable to get a single woman's attention. Meanwhile, across the room, an average-looking guy with a regular job has women laughing at his jokes and exchanging numbers. You've seen this scenario play out countless times, and it reveals something most men fundamentally misunderstand about how female attraction actually works. But here's what no one tells you. Everything men think they know about what women want is not just wrong, it's backwards. The strategies that make logical sense to the male brain are precisely the strategies that fail with women. And the two biggest misconceptions about female selection are actually keeping millions of men single, frustrated, and walking away from dating entirely. What I'm about to reveal will shatter everything you thought you knew about hypergamy, attraction, and why being a high-value man might be setting you up for failure. Today we're diving deep into the two fundamental misconceptions that are destroying men's understanding of female selection, why the concept of hypergamy is being completely misinterpreted, and how this misunderstanding is creating an entire generation of men who either give up on dating entirely or pursue strategies that actually make them less attractive to women. By the end of this exploration, you'll understand why female selection operates on principles that seem completely irrational to the male mind, why meeting women's criteria doesn't guarantee attraction, and most importantly, what really drives female choice beyond the superficial markers most men obsess over. I've spent years studying evolutionary psychology, sexual selection theory, and the actual mechanisms of attraction, and what I'm about to reveal will fundamentally change how you think about dating, relationships, and your own value as a man. But first, let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. Have you ever wondered why some men seem effortlessly successful with women, while others, despite having everything women supposedly want, struggle endlessly? The answer lies in understanding a concept that's been completely butchered by popular culture. Thanks to the internet, there's been an explosion of awareness about hypergamy. The tendency for women to mate up and choose men who are taller, stronger, richer, and higher status. This information has given the current generation a uniquely privileged position to understand female mating behaviour more clearly than ever before. But with that knowledge has come two devastating misconceptions that are literally destroying men's chances with women and their motivation to even try. When most men first learn about the reality of hypergamy, their reaction isn't motivation, it's complete discouragement. Picture the typical scenario. A young man discovers that women are supposedly only interested in the top 10% of men. He looks at himself, wasn't in the top 10% in high school, wasn't in college, isn't now in his 20s, and he inappropriately concludes one of two things. Either he could never enter those upper echelons, or even if he could, the payoff wouldn't be worth the time and effort required. He thinks to himself, I don't have anything a woman is really going to want, and concludes, why bother? And on some level, you can understand this reaction. Dating isn't symmetrical. Men initiate the vast majority of interactions, so men disproportionately experience more rejection on the front end. Women terminate the vast majority of relationships, so men disproportionately experience more rejection on the back end. This rejection can be painful on multiple dimensions: emotional, social, financial, and psychological. These men may be rationally concluding that a high-risk, low-reward endeavour doesn't make sense for them. If we were talking about investing their money, we would call this decision prudent, and no one would have a problem with it. But when men make the same risk assessment about dating, suddenly everyone has a problem with it. They're told to grow up, man up, stop snivelling, and frankly, fall in line. This reaction is hardly fair and reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of what these men are actually calculating. Here's what these men miss. They fundamentally misunderstand the payoff of hypergamy. They think the benefit of becoming a high-value man is that women will finally want them. They see it as a transaction. I become what women want. Therefore, women reward me with attention, sex, and relationships. But this transactional thinking reveals the first massive misconception about hypergamy, that it primarily benefits women. It doesn't. Hypergamy primarily benefits men and can only indirectly benefit women, namely if a man chooses to bestow the benefit upon her. Think about this logically. A top 10% man can only indirectly benefit a woman, and then only if she can acquire and maintain access to him. However, a top 10% man directly benefits himself. He directly benefits from being stronger, wealthier, and higher status. These things are primarily good for him and only secondarily good for others. Even if much of his wealth and status are stripped from him by divorce or breakup, which can certainly happen in today's society, he remains the source of that value. He became the source of that value in the transformational process of becoming a top 10% man. The man who builds himself into physical excellence gains strength, energy, confidence, and health that benefit him regardless of female attention. The man who builds wealth gains security, options, and resources that serve him whether he's single or partnered. The man who develops skills, knowledge, and status gains capabilities that enhance every aspect of his life. But men who view self-improvement through the lens of, "What will this get me from women?" have already lost the game. They're approaching their own development as a means to an end rather than an end in itself. This mindset sets them up for resentment when women don't respond the way they expect, and it makes them vulnerable to abandoning their growth when results don't come quickly enough. The first misconception about hypergamy is that self-improvement is primarily about getting women. In reality, becoming a high-value man is primarily about becoming the kind of person who doesn't need external validation to feel valuable. When you understand this, the entire game changes. Not all men get discouraged when they learn about hypergamy. A smaller subset gets fired up, thinking they can hack the game, and this leads to an even more dangerous misconception. These men think, "Fantastic. With this information, I can analyze what really works with respect to mating and dating. I can bring myself into alignment with female selection preferences. I can get rich, get fit, get smooth. Let's go out there and get this bread." In many respects, this is an adaptive response because, as we established, all of these things directly benefit the man in question. However, this is where men are often deceived by their own logical thinking patterns. Here's the brutal truth. Women don't actually give sex and relationships to men simply as a consequence of men meeting their selection criteria. The idea that doing behavior X will solve problem Y is a masculine problem-solving strategy projected onto women, and it doesn't work. Men hear that women want a guy with a six-pack and a six-figure income, and they think, "Great, if I get these things, if I'm finally what women want, then women will reward me with sex and relationships." It's the same mentality that believes, if I buy her a drink, listen to her problems, and show my value, then she will reward me with sex at the end of the date, just scaled up. The disappointing reality is that this transactional approach fundamentally misunderstands how female attraction operates. Sure, all other things being equal, a woman is more likely to choose a guy with a six-pack and a six-figure income over a guy who doesn't have those things. But it's not true that the vast majority of women will choose a guy just because he has a six-pack and a six-figure income. These things might make it easier for a guy to get his foot in the door, but it's better to consider meeting women's hypergamous criteria as a necessary but insufficient condition of sexual opportunity. Unless you're world famous, women aren't going to be lining up to date you even if you have all the things that hypergamy says women are looking for. A good-looking brain surgeon can drink at the bar by himself all night. Why? Because despite the fact that he may have worked 10 to 20 years to meet women's hypergamous criteria, he has to start from scratch with every new woman he meets. Think about this. He could be a successful, handsome, eligible bachelor who has worked hard for years to earn his social proof and status, and he will still have to start at square one with every new interaction. For a lot of women, square one means convincing them that he's not a serial killer. Can you imagine a job interview 20 years into your career, where the interaction begins with the default assumption that you're a fraudulent embezzler until proven otherwise? This is what happens with women. They have to feel safe, they have to feel heard, they have to feel like you're attracted to more than their bodies. And if you say one thing they don't like too early in the interaction, poof, the opportunity vanishes instantly. While it's true that the more a woman is attracted to you, the easier this process becomes, you don't get to bypass this process just because you've got biceps and a bank account. You have to begin with women right where you would have if you hadn't spent 10 or 20 years building your status and lifestyle, namely, at zero. If you spend all that time on your abs and income but never learnt how to actually connect with women, you're probably not going to get as far as the guy who spent a year learning how to genuinely engage with women and has neither the abs nor the income. Meeting women's hypergamous criteria, unfortunately, is not the silver bullet that many men hope it will be. Most of these criteria are what I call attraction proxies, indicators that suggest value but don't create attraction themselves. The second misconception about hypergamy is that meeting women's criteria guarantees attraction. In reality, attraction operates on completely different principles than logical qualification. You can have all the markers of a high-status man and still need to learn how to actually connect with women on an emotional and psychological level. Behind the hypergamous criteria that men obsess over lies an almost endless list of personal, emotional criteria that actually determine whether attraction occurs. Here's what men struggle to understand. Female selection operates on multiple levels simultaneously, and the logical, observable criteria that men can easily identify and work toward represent only the surface layer of a much deeper process. While men focus on the measurable aspects, height, income, status, physical fitness, women are constantly evaluating dozens of subtle factors that can't be optimized through gym sessions or career advancement. Does he remember the day we met? Did he open the door for me? How do I feel when I'm with him? Does he make me laugh? Does he look at other girls? Will our kids' hands look funny? This might seem irrational or even superficial to the male mind, but it reflects a fundamentally different approach to partner selection that has deep evolutionary roots. Women have historically faced much higher cost for poor mate selection. Pregnancy, childbirth, and child rearing represent massive investments of time, energy, and resources. This has led to the evolution of extremely sophisticated screening mechanisms that operate largely below the level of conscious awareness. What we call chemistry, or spark, is actually a complex evaluation system that's processing hundreds of microsignals about genetic compatibility, emotional stability, social intelligence, and long-term potential. A woman might not be able to articulate why she feels uncomfortable with one man and completely at ease with another, but her nervous system is conducting a thorough assessment based on voice tonality, body language, pheromones, humour timing, conversational flow, and countless other factors. This is why a man can check every box on paper and still generate no attraction, while another man with none of the right credentials can create intense chemistry. The neurosurgeon underwear model who makes 7 figures and shelters abandoned puppies might still fail to create attraction if he lacks the subtle social calibration that makes women feel genuinely seen, understood, and emotionally engaged. Men often interpret this as women being illogical, or not knowing what they want, but this misses the point entirely. Women know exactly what they want. They want to feel a certain way in a man's presence. The challenge is that this feeling can't be purchased, achieved, or optimized in the same way that biceps or bank accounts can be. This emotional layer of selection explains why women often end up with men who don't meet their stated preferences. She might say she wants someone ambitious and successful, but find herself drawn to the struggling artist who makes her laugh and feel understood. She might claim to want someone financially stable, but feel chemistry with the guy who's between jobs but has incredible emotional intelligence. The tragedy is that many men, after working for years to meet the surface level criteria, become bitter when they discover that these achievements don't translate to romantic success. They feel deceived, as if women were lying about what they wanted. But women weren't lying. They were describing the conscious, rational layer of their preferences while being largely unaware of the deeper, more powerful emotional and psychological factors that actually drive their choices. This disconnect creates a vicious cycle. Men optimize for the wrong variables, fail to achieve the results they expected, and conclude that either women are impossible to understand or that the system is rigged against them. Meanwhile, women continue to be drawn to men who naturally understand how to create emotional connection, regardless of whether those men have worked on traditional self-improvement. Female selection isn't primarily about logical qualifications, it's about emotional experience. Women don't choose men based on spreadsheets, they choose based on how a man makes them feel. Understanding this emotional reality is the key to bridging the gap between what men think women want and what actually creates attraction. Even when men understand that attraction involves more than just meeting criteria, they often miss another crucial element: proximity and opportunity. Here's a reality that many men struggle to accept. Being a high-value man does not automatically lead to effortless sexual opportunity. This doesn't change if you're in the top 10%. It may change if you're in the top 0.001%, though I'm not sure, I'm not there yet. But it definitely doesn't change in the top 10%. This creates what I call the proximity paradox. The very process of becoming a high-value man often removes you from the environments where you'd naturally meet women. You're spending long hours building your career, working out at expensive gyms frequented mostly by other ambitious men, living in high-end areas where everyone keeps to themselves, and socializing primarily with other successful professionals. Meanwhile, the guy who's naturally good with women is probably spending his evenings in social environments, practicing conversation, learning to read social dynamics, and developing the interpersonal skills that actually create attraction. He's building social proof through actual social interaction, rather than through achievement markers. This is why so many successful men find themselves paradoxically lonely, despite having everything that should make them attractive. They've optimized for the wrong variables. They've built impressive resumes but haven't built the social skills necessary to convert their achievements into romantic opportunity. The proximity paradox extends beyond just meeting women. Even when high-achieving men do encounter potential partners, they often struggle with the same fundamental challenge. They approach relationships like business deals. They present their qualifications, outline their value proposition, and expect logical evaluation of their merits. But attraction doesn't work like hiring decisions. Women aren't conducting interviews for the position of girlfriend. They're looking for someone who makes them feel alive, understood, desired, and emotionally engaged. All the achievements in the world can't substitute for the ability to create genuine connection and emotional resonance. This is particularly challenging for highly analytical men who've succeeded in other areas of life through logical problem solving. They're used to identifying variables, optimizing performance, and achieving predictable results. But human attraction involves chaos theory. Small changes in approach can create dramatically different outcomes, and the same strategy can work completely differently with different people. The men who naturally succeed with women often have something that can't be taught through typical self-improvement advice. They're genuinely curious about women as individuals rather than as problems to be solved. They ask questions because they want to know the answers, not because they're following a script. They share stories because they're excited to connect, not because they're trying to demonstrate value. This authentic engagement creates a completely different dynamic than the calculated approach that many men adopt after learning about hypergamy. Women can sense the difference between genuine interest and strategic manipulation, even when the strategic approach involves doing objectively good things. The proximity paradox reveals that becoming attractive and being able to attract are two different skill sets. You can become the most impressive man in the world, but if you can't translate that value into genuine human connection, you'll remain frustrated despite all your achievements. Perhaps the most counterintuitive aspect of female selection is that the more you want female validation, the less likely you are to receive it. Both misconceptions about hypergamy, the discouragement trap and the optimization fallacy, share a common root. They place women's approval as the ultimate goal and validation of a man's worth. This creates what I call the validation vortex, a psychological trap that actually repels the very thing men are seeking. When men approach self-improvement with the primary goal of attracting women, they unconsciously communicate something deeply unattractive, that their sense of self-worth depends on external validation. Women can sense this neediness from miles away, and it triggers every evolutionary alarm bell designed to screen out weak, dependent partners. Think about it from a woman's perspective. If a man's confidence and self-worth are contingent on her approval, what happens when she's having a bad day? What happens when she needs support rather than being someone's source of validation? What happens during the inevitable challenges that arise in any relationship? Women are naturally drawn to men who would be fine without them, not because they want to be ignored or taken for granted, but because they want to be chosen rather than needed. There's a crucial difference between a man who wants to share his life with a woman and a man who needs a woman to complete his life. This is why the men who are most successful with women often seem somewhat indifferent to female attention. It's not that they don't appreciate women or don't want relationships. It's that their primary source of satisfaction comes from their own growth, purpose, and self-respect rather than from external validation. The validation vortex also explains why nice guys often struggle despite having good intentions. When a man's niceness is motivated by a desire to earn approval rather than genuine care for others, it becomes a form of covert contract. I'll be nice to you, and in exchange, you should like me. This transactional approach to human interaction feels manipulative, even when the man's conscious intentions are good. Conversely, men who are genuinely nice because they enjoy making others happy, without expecting anything in return, often find that their authentic kindness is incredibly attractive. The difference isn't in the behaviour, it's in the motivation and energy behind the behaviour. Breaking free from the validation vortex requires a fundamental shift in perspective, from seeing women as the prize to be won, to seeing yourself as someone with enough value that you can afford to be selective about who you choose to spend time with. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or dismissive, it means developing genuine self-respect based on your own standards, rather than others' approval. This shift is terrifying for many men because it requires taking full responsibility for their own happiness and self-worth. It's much easier to blame external factors, women's standards, society's expectations, genetic disadvantages, than to confront the possibility that the problem might be internal. But this internal work is exactly what creates the kind of authentic confidence that women find genuinely attractive. When a man is truly comfortable with himself, genuinely passionate about his life, and honestly satisfied with his own company, he naturally becomes someone others want to be around. The validation vortex reveals the ultimate paradox of attraction. The more you need female approval, the less likely you are to get it. True attractiveness comes from being so satisfied with your own life that sharing it with someone else is a choice, not a necessity. Understanding these misconceptions about hypergamy reveals the path forward, integrating genuine self-development with authentic social skills. The solution isn't to abandon self-improvement or to ignore the realities of female selection. The solution is to approach both with a completely different mindset, one that integrates personal development with genuine human connection skills. First, pursue excellence for its own sake, not as a strategy to attract women. Build your body because you want to feel strong and healthy. Develop your career because you're passionate about your work and want to create value in the world. Cultivate skills and knowledge because learning and growth are inherently satisfying. When your motivation comes from internal satisfaction rather than external validation, you naturally develop the kind of confidence that's genuinely attractive. Second, recognize that social skills are just as important as any other form of self-improvement, and they require just as much dedicated practice. Most men spend years learning their profession, but expect to intuitively understand human psychology and social dynamics. They'll read dozens of books about their field, but won't invest serious time in understanding communication, emotional intelligence, or relationship dynamics. This is backwards. If you want to have meaningful relationships, romantic or otherwise, you need to develop the skills that create genuine connection. This means learning to listen actively, to empathize authentically, to communicate your thoughts and feelings clearly, and to navigate social situations with confidence and calibration. Third, approach women as individuals rather than as representatives of their gender. Each woman is a unique person with her own experiences, preferences, challenges, and dreams. When you're genuinely curious about who she is as an individual, rather than trying to apply universal strategies or trigger generic attraction mechanisms, you create the possibility for real connection. This individualized approach also protects you from the bitterness that comes from generalizing about women based on limited experiences. When you understand that rejection often has nothing to do with your worth as a person, she might be in a relationship dealing with personal issues, not in a space for dating or simply not compatible with you, you can maintain your dignity and continue pursuing connections without becoming cynical. Fourth, develop what I call outcome independence, the ability to engage authentically without being attached to specific results. This doesn't mean not caring about outcomes. It means caring more about being true to yourself than about controlling others' responses. When you can approach interactions with genuine interest and authentic expression while being unattached to specific outcomes, you naturally become more attractive because you're not radiating neediness or manipulation. Finally, understand that both men and women benefit when men develop genuine attractiveness rather than pursuing shortcuts or manipulative strategies. Women want to be attracted to good men. They want to find partners who are genuinely impressive, emotionally intelligent, and capable of building meaningful relationships. When men develop real value, Both in terms of personal achievement and social skills, everyone wins. The goal isn't to become someone you're not in order to attract women. The goal is to become the best version of who you already are, while developing the skills necessary to share that value with others. This approach takes longer than quick fixes or pickup strategies, but it creates lasting attractiveness and the foundation for genuine relationships. Both misconceptions about hypergamy, giving up because the standards seem impossible, or treating attraction like a video game to be optimized, miss the deeper truth. Attraction is about becoming someone worth being attracted to, while maintaining the authenticity and social skills that allow others to see and appreciate that value. True attractiveness isn't about meeting a checklist of criteria or mastering manipulation techniques. It's about developing genuine value while maintaining the authenticity and social intelligence that allows others to recognize and connect with that value. When you get this integration right, attraction becomes natural rather than forced.